Welcome to the Football New South Wales Community Podcast, covering all things related to the football family at local community level. My name's Teo Pellizzeri. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to hear our other chats with key figures around the game in New South Wales. Our guest for this episode is the Chief Executive Officer of Football South Coast, Anne-Marie Balliana. Anne-Marie, thanks for joining us.
Great. Hi, Teo. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into some of the key elements of 2024 and some of the other subjects that we've highlighted for discussing Football South Coast, tell us a bit about your association. For those not familiar with the geography of where Football South Coast entails, where are your boundaries? What are some of the key centres and towns and cities? And how many players does that area encompass?
So Football South Coast is actually a fairly new association. We're 14 years old. Prior to that, the Illawarra was split into 5 different associations, juniors, men's, a women's, a referees, and then an amateur men association. So about 15 years ago, Football New South Wales said it's quite a unique setup. We need to become one association. So that happened. Our boundaries, basically, we Gerringong, so as south as Gerringong, and then Helensburgh. We also have a number of clubs that participate in our competitions from other associations. So we have Shellhaven that have teams in our Premier League. We have Picton, which would be the MacArthur Association. We have the Highlands. So, and I think that's probably because of the strength of our premiership competitions, which are semi-professional. So we do find that some of those associations put in sort of their rep teams into that space. We've got 14,500 players this year, so that's record numbers for us, up quite significantly from last year. So that's pretty much us in a nutshell, really.
You mentioned that it's a young association at 14 years. How many staff do you have working for you at Football South Coast, and how many of those are full-time, and sort of what's your network of contributors and volunteers, and how many people are sort of under the auspices of Football South Coast, contributing and working for the game?
Yeah, well, we have 7 full-time staff, and that just comprises of mainly of our competition managers. We have a female football development manager as well. We run a lot of, our winter competitions is our core business, but we run a lot of programs. So we have a staff member that helps running that out as well. We've got our facility at Ian McClellan Park, which is our home, I guess. So we have a facility manager too. So 7 full-time, 1 part-time staff member, and loads and loads of volunteers. So the way that we run our structure, we've got our board, and then we've got subcommittees so we call them football councils. So we'll have a women's football council, a junior football council, a men's football council, our community league men's, which a football council, a referee football council. So they're comprised of all these subcommittees that really focus on the strategies underpinning each of those different areas. And then there's a representative of council that sits on our board. We've really got a lot of volunteers that are basically helping our staff out to basically manage the association, help us run the association and meet some of the strategic goals that we set. An army of people really supporting football in the Illawarra.
And just on you personally, how long have you been the CEO, and what's your sort of journey through both either football or sports administration?
I think I was born into football, Teo. My family ran a club called Fairy Meadow United, which started off in the 60s. So that was a club that my family ran pretty much up until the late 80s. So my whole childhood was spent around football. But however, I went to Wollongong Uni, got a commerce degree. I entered into the world of banking and finance. And it was only when I was working in Sydney for a banking organisation that my boss at the time was actually president of the Junior Association. and they needed a bit of assistance with their finances. And I'm a chartered accountant, so he asked me to sort of step in, and I was on the junior association for a number of years, help them out. Then that progressed into Football South Coast, and I was on the board of Football South Coast for a few years. And then the CEO's role popped up, and I threw my hat in the ring. And 10 years later, here we are.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for giving me and any of our listeners not familiar with the area, our bearings, so we can put some of these numbers in context. Because you mentioned that you're at a high watermark for registered participating players. Take us through some of your success stories of 2024. What are some of the key numbers and percentage increases that you've seen and overseen as part of your winter participation this season?
Yeah, so last year we were at about 12,700 players. This year, as I've mentioned, 14,500 players. We've seen growth across both males and females, but, in the female space where we've got 71 new female-only teams, which is huge for us. We have our Men's Premier League, which is a semi-professional competition, as I've said, very high profile. We have teams or clubs that progressed a couple of years ago into the round of 32 with the Australia Cup. So we've got a really strong Men's Premier League, our Women's Premier League. This is the second year that we've had our Women's Premier League as well, and that's we're looking at more clubs potentially coming aboard into that competition. But yeah, just right across, we've just seen huge growth. The number of divisions is exploded as a result of the number increases. I think last year was really the first time in the female space we've had female-only divisions and competitions, right from under sixes all the way up. And again, we've seen growth in that. So we're hoping that will continue for many years as a result of some of these teams entering into the mini roos space as well. So yeah, I mean, it's just going gangbusters at the moment, and of course with that growth comes challenges with infrastructure, with referees. So it's a problem, but it's a good problem to have. We just need to now focus on some of those other areas to support the growth that we are seeing.
It's one thing for a whole lot of prospective interest to come in at the top of the funnel, but the number of interested people you can actually turn into boots on the grass depends on, the other end of the funnel. So tell me about what your association has done to embrace the challenge of taking on such an increase in capacity, because I'm sure that other associations and other governing bodies, would be looking at, the spike in interest created by Women's World Cup, Socceroos Good 2022 World Cup, interest in the game generally. But what is it that turns that interest into boots on the ground to such a significant uptake? How do you catch that interest and make sure you're able to embrace it?
Well, I think with the women's, we saw with the Asian Cup when we had that in Australia, we saw an increase in player numbers at that time. And of course, with the Women's World Cup, that was just, a huge catalyst for so much interest in football, especially being played in our own home backyard. So what we tried to do last year off the back of the announcement of the Women's World Cup was introduce a lot of come and try type things, a lot of social competitions, so that we could get people to perhaps that never thought about playing football. And summer football, by the way, is a great way to do this as well. We found that 20% to 30% of players don't play football during winter. So, and this is a great way for them to come and try football. So we really tried to roll out a whole bunch of social competitions and, as I say, come and try for people to get a bit of a taste for football whilst there was all this interest, in our own backyard. And I think that was really how you then convert those spectators or mildly interested into, let's play the game. And I think that's why we've seen the Matildas effect and this huge increase in numbers. Myself, I've decided that I was going to play after a 10-year break this year, and I'm playing in a team where half the team have never played before. They're just inspired by what they saw of the Matildas. We've got mothers and daughters playing in the same team. We've got people that, like myself, that decided after, quite a long break, let's give it a go again. And, we're not just seeing increases in the junior space, but we're seeing, increases in our all-age teams. So, this is what we're seeing as a result of having tournaments like the World Cup feature, right here where everybody can touch and feel what football is all about.
So it again, with regards to how that interest is embraced, how much of it is club driven, how much of it is association driven in terms of club education and talking about allocation of resources or lobbying for extra field space or how clubs use their field space. Because the story I hear from a lot of associations, particularly the landlocked ones in metropolitan Sydney, is we literally have nowhere else to put people until we start thinking differently about how we use the pitches. So what have been some of the keys to actually being able to put those players on the grass and the things that both the association and the clubs have done in order to accommodate it?
Yeah, so, infrastructure, obviously, have we got enough space to put all these increased players? So one of the strategic pillars that we've got, and I guess it's going to be a priority across nearly every association, is infrastructure. And we've said as a minimum, every field should have drainage, irrigation, lighting and reasonable change rooms. And what we're finding here is that storage is a real problem and people are using their change rooms for storage, which means that, there's just, a combination of issues with that. So, look, we work very closely with our clubs to look at what their priorities are with their grounds and the infrastructure so that we can accommodate, especially those clubs that are experiencing the growth. And look, 2 years ago, Tao, we had, obviously that wet weather, we had 3 or 4 clubs that completely lost their ground for the year. And they were just looking at whatever space was available that they could accommodate some games or not even have home games playing away. So it's not just the growth, it's weather as well that we need to start catering for our users. So it's really working closely with our clubs, identifying their needs, working closely with all levels of government, looking at whatever funding opportunities pop up. And I've got to say our clubs have been brilliant in terms of their proactivity in looking at whatever funding and grants are available. So working really hard around that as well. And it really is it's a hard slog. It's looking at every opportunity and trying to fit the needs with our clubs based on what grants and funding opportunities are popping up. But it's really, and we've done a lot of work on developing a list of priorities so that we can work through those list of priorities with the clubs. And get them to a point where they can cater for the additional growth and where the game's headed.
Sorry, how many different councils are we talking about? Is it are we talking about half a dozen, or does the Wollongong City Council encompass most of this? How many different local government associations are you regularly interacting with?
So it'd be Wollongong City Council would be the main one, and then Shell Harbour Council and then Kiama Council are the key ones that fall within our member clubs.
Okay, so one thing that comes with player increase is the need to administer these players, building capacity within the clubs, but also referees to referee the games. Tell us what's been behind the drive to increase your numbers there.
Yeah, so we've experienced an increase in our referees this year, and the majority of that increase is because of, I think, junior referees. And again, I think this is our clubs that have really taken the lead. We have a unique structure here. And I think it's a good different, by the way, is that all of our clubs, we've got 24 clubs that have a junior base. And each of those 24 clubs have a junior club referee coordinator. And that coordinator is the person that really works with the referees during the year, but importantly, a lot of those referees are players. So our clubs do a great job in looking at who's interested in, also becoming a referee, and we will run as many courses as we can in terms of those level fours. We had one club approach us last year and said, look, we've got 30 of our players that want to go through the level 4 course and become a referee. So we'll do it whenever there's demand for those courses. And I think that's why we've had the increase in numbers at that in the junior space. With the seniors is a little bit more difficult, and what we've introduced there is a team referee concept where every team will need to nominate somebody that will undertake that level 4 referee course so that they can officiate those games on the weekend. And again, that has helped us as well, filling some of those gaps that we were seeing at the senior level of our game as well. So there's probably the two key things that we've done in terms of our numbers over the last year or so.
How important is environment and culture as well when it comes to respect for referees and also making it an enticing prospect? I mean, it's great to hear there's enthusiasm for refereeing juniors, and obviously referees can earn pocket money for doing that job, but how important is it that it's a rewarding job in terms of, a healthy environment to go and actually, practice the craft of refereeing?
It's super important. Look, if we don't have referees, the integrity of the competition is impacted, the quality of the competition, retention of players is impacted. There's a whole bunch of things. So it's so important that we're providing safe environments for our referees. And that's always a challenge. I mean, we've introduced a couple of things over the last few years. We've got a spectator behavioural management policy where there's an expectation on clubs, because what we're finding is a lot of the abuse is coming from spectators. So it's really saying to clubs, well, you have a responsibility to manage your own spectators, both home and away. So we've put some parameters around that in terms of expectations of our clubs. But the other big thing too is, on the field, so the players in that technical area. And I think you find if the technical area is a little out of control, you can see that then filter onto players and spectators. So it's really about providing coaching and education to our referees on how they manage that technical area in the laws of the game. So we need to look at all these ways that we can, all those different contact points, I guess, on game day, and how we can make sure that our referees want to come back and see refereeing as a pathway for themselves. Not, a lot of our referees are players, and that's where we run into some of our shortage issues. But there are those people that might try refereeing, fall in love with that, and then how do we get them to stay and be a referee and really progress their pathway in that aspect as well.
And don't forget, being released as part of a little bonus drop alongside this chat is the Football South Coast Referee Discussion Panel, which featured A-League Referee of the Year Alex King, A-League Assistant Referee Kearney Robinson, and former FIFA referee Strebre Dolovsky. Anne-Marie Balliana, the CEO of Football South Coast, is our guest. And Anne-Marie, I understand that panel was quite a success.
Yes, it was. We had about 50 of our local referees there. I mean, we were lucky because we had the National Youth Championships in Wollongong last week. So there was this opportunity there to get these great referees to come and speak to 50 of our local referees. And yeah, the feedback we got was that it was just such a good opportunity for these referees to get an insight into the journey of these referees. We all know that there's some huge challenges being a referee, but also, you're looking at the success of these guys and what they needed to do to get to where they are today. So I think that was an invaluable experience for our guys.
Let's talk infrastructure. What stands out to you as some of the great success stories? We discussed the various councils that your association and the clubs regularly interact with, but you also mentioned all levels of government and how you've had some wins and some really hard work to tap into funding in recent years. So tell us about some of the projects that you're particularly proud of.
Yeah, look, I think as I mentioned earlier, our clubs have done a remarkable job in getting their infrastructure. So, a shout out goes out to clubs like Balliana, Russell Vale, who have undertaken these huge drainage projects. So, this year you can already see a difference with the wet weather that we've had, that they can continue to play on their grounds. We've had so many clubs upgrade their change rooms to making them female friendly, which has been great to see. Look, Ian McClellan, we were lucky enough to get some funding for a new building with 2 new change rooms as well, and upgrade our grass field. And we were fortunate enough that we were shortlisted as a training-based site for the Women's World Cup, and that opened up some opportunity for funding. So our guys have just done a remarkable job in really understanding where their priorities are and just accessing whatever opportunities there are to get some grants and funding. So credit goes to those clubs, and some of them are still working really hard in the background now.
One last one I wanted to ask was about the halo effect, not so much of the Women's World Cup, but of the production line of players that is coming out of Wollongong that are going into the higher echelons of the game, but also the broader South Coast region, because Michelle Heyman famously from Shell Harbour, but at a much younger age. You look at the A-League Women's Grand Final, you've got Mackenzie Hawkesby, Margot Chevet, Kaylee Talon-Henniker, Sienna Silvesca. Sydney FC's virtually become a South Coast team. What is the reason that so many players are progressing up to the elite level of the game and creating such great role models for younger players in the region?
Well, I think it comes back to what's happening at club level. These players start playing at grassroots and they fall in love with the game, and that's because of the coaching that they're getting, the way that their clubs are looking after them. So, and they wouldn't progress on to, participating in SAP programs or any of that if they didn't fall in love with the game. So it all comes back to our clubs and how they're nurturing these players. And we do have a big focus as well on coaching development as well. We're really proactive in rolling out as many coaching courses as we can. And again, you see our clubs are so proactive in wanting to get more and more of those resources dedicated in those spaces. So, and then we've got now the Wolves, we've got the Stingrays, we've also got South Coast Flame in terms of clubs participating in Football New South Wales competitions too. So there's lots of opportunities for players to really take that extra step, and then if they're seen by A-League clubs, and then off they go, as we're seeing what's happening, which is just absolutely brilliant. But it all comes down to our clubs.
Anne-Marie Balliana, CEO of Football South Coast, thanks for joining us. As we let you go, what are you hoping to tick off between now and the end of the winter season in 2024?
Some dry weather. Yeah, we've got a few games to make up. So, as one of my competition managers was saying, he's surgically repairing the draw at the moment. So we just hope that we have some good weather. We can see us to the end of the competition and have a great final series.
Well, fingers crossed for that. Thank you for joining us, and all the best continuing in your role and for your association as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Teo.
Yes, a big thank you to Anne-Marie Balliana, the CEO of Football South Coast. These are the sort of chats we have on the Football New South Wales Community Podcast. Have a listen to some of the other episodes that we have dropped over the last 2 seasons. Some of them really are timeless in terms of their relevance to the issues being faced by the various associations. Make sure to subscribe and rate us 5 stars while you're there. And if you're interested in the NPL New South Wales or leagues competitions, you can also find Kickoff, which is produced by Football New South Wales. Give that a listen too. My name's Teo Pellizzeri. Thanks for your company for now. Goodbye.